You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 20 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host, Sonny Brown, and in this episode I talk to Jonathan Brookins. Now, Jonathan is a very interesting character. He was on the Ultimate Fighter show season 12, which was coached by GSP and had assistant coaches like Firas Zahabi and John Danaher. And he ends up winning that show by beating Michael Johnson, has a run in the UFC, and then he actually travels to India, takes a break from fighting, goes to India, does a yoga retreat, silent meditation, and we get into all of that discussion in the podcast, but probably that alone would give you an idea that he's not your typical fighter. And he's now living in New York and also has his own podcast called The Work. We discuss, his early days, time in the Ultimate Fighter house, that time in India, and also his fascination with the mystic and philosopher George Gurdjieff and how he takes some of those lessons from martial arts and applies them to his life. Now let's go to the podcast. Mr. Brookins, how are you today, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been, good times here. You're coming from New York. What's it like there at the moment?
It's weird, man. New York's it's a tiny, big place. It's very small in geography, but it's obviously packed with people. So it's depending on like which borough you're in. The energy is much different. So I'm down in the downtown Manhattan area, and I'm lucky for that. It's fairly mellow, but I mean, you literally, you travel uptown just even some blocks, and it might be really different energy. Maybe like even slightly dangerous because people aren't really out on the streets like they used to be. It's definitely different, and that's about all I can say right now because I have nothing else to compare it to. It is just a completely different experience.
Yeah, it's certainly new experiences and different experiences going on at the moment. And that's one thing I think with your career that you've mentioned the different energies, and probably your overall fighting career has been very unique in that I think you've probably experienced, a different range of experiences than other fighters. And I probably just want to start off just getting into first what drew you towards fighting in general or mixed martial arts.
So fighting for me was always a bit of a means to an end. I never really grew up as a person that ever really wanted to fight, and I never even really wanted to wrestle. These were always things that they weren't my choices. They weren't my immediate choices. I was never like, wrestling is something that I want to do as a kid. I didn't want to do it. Like, that wasn't the sport that I initially set out to do in high school. But I didn't make the basketball team. I was a bit small and all of that. So the only sport left to play was wrestling. And then again, when I left, I ended up getting good at it, and I got a college wrestling scholarship. But then I left school. I didn't finish college. And then again, I was left with limited options. And the only thing for a kid who only acquired wrestling skills to do at 20 years old was fighting. So, I just went for it. I didn't know much about it. But with these things, I say, I never really wanted to do it. But in a lot of, in a lot of avenues in life, or in just a lot of things in life, like kind of like a rule of thumb, sometimes it's the things that we don't necessarily want that are the best things for us. And that's with nutrition, and that's with, sometimes even relationships and all of that. So fighting and wrestling, these were the things that were the best things for me to grow as a person, but they weren't immediately the things that I wanted. Yeah,
okay. And that's obviously wrestling and fighting, some of the hardest things to actually go into as a sport, at least. And you got some, early success in the WEC. And How did you start training for your fighting in those days? What kind of things were you doing, and how did you find that process?
So I initially started with a fighter. His name was Crazy Horse at the time. Now that a lot of people know him as he goes by Felony, Charles Felony Bennett. And we were just in a small town in Florida. He was the only real fighter in the town, and I just kind of, followed his lead more or less. He was a free spirit and marched by the beat of his own drum, and I could really relate to that, even though we were like very different as people. So that was very cool. And in Florida, the fight scene back in the day, it was like ATT, American Top Team versus Florida. So it's pretty much it had American Top Team, and they were pretty much fighting every other kid that was slightly decent. And so I had built up sometimes little rivalries with some of the kids from down South Florida. So I had many good fights down in South Florida, but then oftentimes some alliances. There was times where ATT actually took me in, and I went in there and I trained with Dean Thomas when Dean Thomas was going to fight Kenny Florian in the UFC. They invited me down in there. So a lot of my early days were in Florida, and it was just kind of like playing that Florida circuit. So there was a lot of fighters in the time around my time that were coming up. Jorge Masvidal was one of them that was like young around the time, and we were fighting on some of the same cards. And Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres, and then we ended up being on the Ultimate Fighter show together. So it was just like an early young day Florida circuit, and the sport was still fairly new. So each coach and everywhere you went, they were still kind of learning how to put it all together. So you would have to find a jiu-jitsu coach, and you have to find a striking coach, which is still, it's kind of like that. But nowadays you can find a coach who can kind of overview the whole thing, maybe like how like a Greg Jackson does or something like that. But yeah, so I played the whole circuit. I even went down to Greg Jackson's when I was younger. I think I trained at like most of the top teams and America top team. So yeah, I trained with a lot of different squads when I was younger.
Nice. And yeah, my understanding was that you actually lived with Charles Bennett, and I'm sure he's certainly a free spirit. And I'm sure you've got some good stories from there that maybe if we get to it at the end, we could discuss, because I'm sure that's a whole nother tangent we could go down.
Yeah. He was a great guy.
So in the WEC, probably the biggest fight you had was facing Jose Aldo. And that was Aldo in his prime, brutalizing people with leg kicks. Had to have been an intimidating fight, a scary fight. My understanding is, that the knee might still have some remnants of damage from those Aldo kicks. Run me through what happened there and what you took from that.
Yeah, I mean, fighting Aldo in the WEC was interesting. It was a interesting night of fights. There was 6 of us 145-pounders fighting that night. Mike Brown was fighting Uriah Faber. I was fighting Jose Aldo. And I think like Ronnie Yaya was fighting somebody else. And so there was like 6 of us that night. And I was like, wow, out of the 6 of us 145-pounders tonight, one of us is going to be the best in the world. At the time, it was Uriah Faber was kind of the top dog. But I thought between me and Aldo, I thought one of us had a chance to be the kingpin. Aldo wasn't a big name at the time. And I thought out of like Mike Brown, Uriah, and all that, I was like, between Aldo and I was like, I think between him and I, like one of us has a chance to get in the mix. And that was my mindset going into that. I was like, I think me and Aldo are good, and I think we're a good matchup for each other. And, you watch the fight, and we're fairly evenly matched in a lot of ways in the beginning. I mean, looking back at my fight career, I was telling somebody, and even on my podcast, like, I never really knew how to fight. Like, not really. Like, I was not a great technical striker or anything. I was always just kind of going off of instinct, and off of that instinct, though, I was pretty dang scrappy, and so I was able to pull off a lot of wins, and I always kind of appreciated that. And so I never counted myself out against anybody. I'm like, I'm weird. I have a weird style, and I'm present. That's the one thing. It's like I'm always present in the cage, and that makes for a little bit of danger. And so I thought I could get Aldo. And somebody told me, they were telling me, I was training in Houston, Texas, for this fight at the time. I was training with a guy named Saul Solis, and Saul was Tito Ortiz's coach. He had coached Rico Rodriguez when he won the UFC championship. So he was kind of trying to build me up as like another guy to make a good run at it. And they were telling me, they were saying, watch out for this guy's leg kicks, man. Like he kicks the legs pretty hard. And here I am, a young fighter, and I had never seen anybody actually really go down from leg kicks, really. You saw it like maybe like once or twice. I think like Pete Spratt or somebody, like it was just such a rare thing. And so I had taken leg kicks that had hurt and was like, oh yeah, I mean they hurt, but like what big deal? After the fight, your legs are a little bit injured and big deal. But this was my first time in a fight, like actually getting so much damage to my legs that like I couldn't move in the fight anymore. I was like, holy smokes, man. Like it's not a matter of like, oh, after the fight, my leg is hurt. After the first round, the very first round, I remember going back to my corner and Tito Ortiz was in my corner, and he like pulled out the stool for me to sit down on. And I couldn't sit down. After the first round, I couldn't sit down on the stool. I was like, I can't bend my leg. If I sit down on that, like I couldn't actually go into, it was already too messed up. And yeah, definitely like permanently damaged my leg. I think it somehow busted the bursa sac. Like, how you have bursa sacs and things? It busted all that open, and to this day, it'll still fill up with fluid. It like tore so much muscles in the leg, like there was internal bleeding in my leg. Crazy, man. It's like you're literally getting hit with a baseball bat, like flush in the leg, for 15 minutes or 13, however long I lasted. So it was definitely one of the most painful experiences, and it was just dumb. It was like, but nowadays, like it's crazy because after that, like I can check a kick pretty good with my front leg now. It just kind of happens automatically. You don't even have to think about it. So that's cool. I didn't have to fight a lot of Muay Thai fights or whatever to gain that skill of checking. I just had to get beat up by Jose Aldo one time, and now I can check a kick fairly decent.
Wow. Well, there's certainly maybe a lesson in learning in that story, that a couple of leg kicks from Jose Aldo, you start to learn how to check afterwards. But hopefully we can figure out ways that you don't need to, and not everyone has to go through that Aldo experience.
Yeah, there's easier ways.
Now, I mean, after that though, it sounds, a very brutal fight, but that obviously didn't stop you, because you then go on to enter into the Ultimate Fighter. You end up winning the Ultimate Fighter. Talking about lessons, what was that process like, and the lessons you took from it most importantly?
The lesson for me with the Ultimate Fighter was, it stuck with me to this day as more of a social experience, social experiment, where previous to the Ultimate Fighter, even with like the Jose Aldo fight, and this is not something I'm proud of, but this is just like who I was, and like I smoked a lot of weed. That was just who I was from the time I was 20 years old. By the time I fought Jose Aldo, I was maybe like 24. So for about like 4 years straight, I just smoked a lot of weed. That was my coping mechanism. I had lost a family member. You get people hear me talk about it on my podcast a lot. And so even when I fought Jose Aldo, you look at the fight, and I got this long hair, and it's in my face, and I'm really, really stoned, man. I smoked like just a couple minutes before going out to the fight. Like I walked out backstage, smoked a joint, I go fight this dude. And I knew that I knew that wasn't right. I was a young kid though, and I wasn't going to listen to anybody. I wasn't going to let somebody tell me you shouldn't do this. I was like, it's working for me. Who am I to listen to you guys? But when you fast forward to the Ultimate Fighter Season 12 tryouts and all of this, I started to kind of rethink my strategy, like how I wanted to approach life and fighting and this. And I told myself, I was like, you know what, man, I like made a little deal with the universe. I was like, you know what, man, like you let me on this show, and I'm gonna stop smoking weed. Like I'll do it. This was like an internal thing that I put into myself, and I was like, you know what, I'll do it. This is how bad I want to be on this show, and because weed was so important to me to function. I had so much anxiety and angst and all of that dealing with life without it seemed almost impossible. But I was like, this is how bad I want to be on this show. I will face myself. And so then, I made the pact earlier, like before I even, because it takes a lot of months for you to get onto the show. You don't just go and try out and they're like, oh, you're on the show. You have to go to the tryout, and then you have to go to Vegas, and then you have to wait, and you have to do this. So in the whole time of waiting, I was still to myself, like, even in this time, I'm not going to smoke. Universe hasn't even told me that I'm on the show yet or anything, but I'm doing this because I want it. And then sure enough, I get on the show, and then I'm in the show. And then again, I tell myself again, I said, you know what, for this whole experience, everybody's drinking in the house, and everybody's drinking, right? Even if it's just 1 drink, 2 drinks a night or whatever, because it's a very, again, you talk about like your social anxiety, there's cameras around this and the other. I was like, I'm going to stay sober this whole 6 weeks, man. Like I'm uncomfortable. I'm already not a very, I'm socially awkward, whatever. But I'm going to stay sober for this whole thing. And because I want it, And sure enough, and I was journaling about it every day. Like I was pretty much living the life of manifestation that I knew in the outside world. If I wanted to succeed and I wanted to achieve something, this is probably the formula that I would have to use. But put into this house for 6 weeks, I was able to implement the strategy and that whole mindset that I always had problems doing in the outside world. Maybe in the outside world, outside of the Ultimate Fighter, maybe you say, I'm going to journal every day. I'm going to do this every day. And you don't, because life gets in the way. There's not a set, structure and schedule. So for me, it was a lesson in knowing that if you dial it in, if you dot your I's and cross your T's, you can do it. You put your mind to something, you write it down, pen to paper. There's a chance, a large chance that like what you believe is gonna manifest itself, and for me that's always what the Ultimate Fighter was to me. It was just the one time in my life where I was able to live my truth and go for it and have the discipline and be proud of myself for all of my efforts and to watch it flourish. And I was never able to recreate that again outside after that. I always would falter somewhere. Maybe it was something as simple as just like chasing chicks. Because again, in the Ultimate Fighter, all distractions were gone. Now try to remove all distractions from your life in the real world, and it's nearly impossible. You're gonna, even in just one moment in the day, you're gonna be like, you know what? What's more important to me today is actually calling that girl or, scrolling through an Instagram, all these little distractions. So ironically enough, at this moment in time is actually probably the closest that in isolation and all of that to recreating that inner manifestation that I was able to create on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said there, journaling, and it sounds like a big, transformative process for you that was really not about the fighting then, I'm sure there was that element to it, but the biggest lesson was that, that transformative process as a person, and which I think is great, obviously. And it's funny that you mention, those, that you appreciated the time of getting away from things and going into a bit of isolation, shall we say, because after you come out and win the Ultimate Fighter, eventually you're fighting Dustin Poirier, and I believe that was a difficult time. You may have collapsed during the weight cut in a yoga studio.
Yeah. How'd you hear that? That's funny.
We do our research here, mate.
That's funny.
And maybe take us through those experiences, because that actually ends up leading you to travel to India. You take a break from fighting. So how did that all connect together?
So yeah, my time in the UFC, it's crazy. I talk about, making a deal with the universe and saying, you know what, I quit smoking weed, like let me on the show, whatever. And it's funny, after I won I didn't win the show yet. I had made it to the finals. So the whole 6 weeks, you kind of go through the prelims, and then they're gonna tape the finale live. You know, that was gonna be a live fight. But after you finish taping the 6 weeks, you go out to a party with all the people who were recording, and you finally get to talk to them because you haven't been able to talk to them for 6 weeks or whatever. And one of the producers, he comes up to me and he says, he's like, man, Jonathan, he's like, I fought so hard for you to be on this show. He's like, we literally had 16 guys, you know, all of their pictures, and we had the cast, and you weren't on there. And he said, I literally was like telling them, I won't even do the show if you don't put this kid Jonathan on. Like, he's good. He's already fought Aldo, you know what I'm saying? Like, and he's unique, you know, let him on the show. And he said, I fought for you to get on there. He said, you didn't know that, man. But and all the other producers were around, and they were like, you know, nodding. They're like, he did. You know, he fought for you to get on there, man. He's like, good job. And I was like, thanks, brother. But I always felt like Dana White never liked me, ever. Like, swear to God. And it's the weirdest thing. I hope one day I get to tell him, like, you know, you fucked me a couple times, and I promise you did. You know, and I swear to God, man, because the numerous times this dude, you know, fucked me over, I'll tell you what happened. First thing that he did, or what they tried to do, the first fight they wanted me to fight coming out of the Ultimate Fighter house, the winner, they wanted me to fight Jeremy Stevens. Like, what the fuck, man? You know what I'm saying? Every other dude that's coming out the show is fighting all of these kids who never fought in the UFC before. And you want me to fight Jeremy Stevens. Jeremy Stevens is still fighting people right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm a young kid, you know? And so I take the fight, and I'm like, I'm going to fight fuck it, I'll do it. And I'm going, and I don't know my left from my right, you know? I'm barely coming out the show, and I'm having problems staying sober still, you know? Because, you know, when we get out of the house, 6 weeks of filming, I'm having 6 weeks of my first sober experience. You know, I come from like, just a little context. Like, I come from a family of addicts, man. You know, like I've now, you know, Dana White can look at it. It's like, since that time, two of my blood brothers, my close brothers, you know, they overdosed and died in this time. You know, and now I have no siblings. I mean, blood siblings. There was 4 of us, and 3 of them overdosed, and it's just me. So I know my wiring, and as the 6 weeks is over, I want to go home. I want to go straight home. I didn't want to do nothing else. I didn't want to have any experience with nothing. It was so overwhelming. I was like, just like, get me back to Florida where I can just go to sleep and ride this. But they're like, no, you have to go out to the strip club. You have to, you know, they're going to give you $1,000, and you have to spend it at the strip club. This was like almost like a mandatory thing. And yeah, people will say, like, yeah, like, you should have just been in the strip club and just stayed sober, whatever. Nah, I mean, I'm 24 years old. I've been locked up for 6 weeks, and everybody's in this high. Man, by the time I leave that strip club, the sun was like high noon, and I was wasted, man. So I barely recovered. I mean, it was off to the races for me. By the time I got home, I was wasted for like the next, you know, month or two. And I have to fight Michael Johnson in like a couple weeks. And I'm barely like, I mean, I'm training like, I probably trained for Michael Johnson like a week or 2. I barely just made it. Barely was able to just like, I remember just sitting in front of my house, and I'm just like crying, swear to God. I'm like, come on, man. Like, stop freaking smoking, stop drinking. Like, every day I wake up and I'm like, you can do it, man. You can do it. Stop. And then, you know, sure enough, like, you know, 5 minutes will go by. Next thing I'm smoking. But barely. So I remember I was like vividly, somebody sent me a book. It just came in the mail, and it was called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Have you ever heard of this book?
I have not.
It's a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And it's about this seagull, a bird named Jonathan. And he wants to be a falcon. He doesn't really want to be a seagull. He wants to like fly like the other birds and do like his own thing. So he does his own little thing, his own little path, and he struggles a bit, but he finds his way. And I remember I'm sitting there and I'm reading this book, and I'm like, and I just start crying. I'm like, if this fucking bird can do it, you know what I'm saying? You can too. So like 2 weeks before the fight, I start crying, and the tears like helped. And I was like, all right. I just had a long cry, and I just went back into my room, and I went to sleep. And I just slept for like the rest of the day. And the next morning I woke up, and I was like, all right, like, you're sober, man. Okay, so I did it. 2 weeks, I got to train for the fight, and I ended up barely squeaking by, barely beating Michael Johnson. He had me in like deep trouble in the beginning of the fight. He was like just beating the trash out of me for the first round. But, you know, I'd already trained with him a lot, so I knew there was some little things that I could kind of do, whatever. And then again, after the fight, you know, we're in the Palms, you know, after party, and you know, it's Ariane Celeste and all these people, and this is like, you know, people are gonna probably dig at me like, this kid's trash, you know, he's a junkie. Yeah, man, like sure enough, man. So I get past the Michael Johnson fight. They want me to fight Jeremy Stephens, and again, like I'm saying, I'm struggling, and nobody's knowing this. Nobody's like really can comprehend, you know, the mental battles and whatnot. And I'm trying. It just nobody knows how to help me. So I'm trying to get ready for the Jeremy Stephens fight, and I break the orbital in my eye, and that was actually probably a lucky thing. You know, I went to go take a shot on somebody, and their knee hit my eye, and it broke this whole thing here. So, and I went to blow my nose, and it just like shoots up. So I'm out of the fight. Then they're like, all right, they give me the guy Eric Koch or whatever, another top guy, whatever, good. And so they're feeding me all these tough guys. I'm like, whatever. I go to fight this guy. This is my first UFC fight. And most people say, like, I won the fight, the first one. And they give the decision to that guy. In my career, I'll lose a lot of fights just based on being awkward and ugly, straight up. Like, I promise you, there's been fights where it's like, if you watching the actual scoring, I won, but I just look uglier, so they give it to the other person. It's fine. So, you know, I lose my first one, and, you know, that hurt. And I think that one sobered me up, right? So I, you know, I go back to the drawing board, and I'm all of a sudden going to, you know, try to be better. I didn't want to lose again. And I know that my family's struggling, and there's a lot riding on me. So for my second fight, I go for it. I invest everything I can into my health. I turned vegan before there was even a single vegan fighter. Even the Diaz brothers weren't like fully vegan. They were like, you know, they liked plants, but they were still talking about eating fish and stuff. But Mac Danzig was the only other one that was like full vegan. And so I was like, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go this route. Cause I got to heal internally. Something's not right up in my brain. I shouldn't be in this loop. And it's coming from somewhere else, because I don't really have a choice in it. And I needed to find a way to break the pattern. And so I invest everything. I mean, like, I'm buying, you know, $700 Vitamix blenders and you know, $1,000 food dehydrators or whatever. And, you know, I got a girlfriend at the time who's really taken to this, making me raw food and stuff. And I go all in. I spend all my money that I had to the time in this, in getting a nice place to live, because I'm like, these are the things these are the problems that I need to solve in order to somehow heal internally, whatever. And so that leads me to why, like, how Dana White fucked me the first time. This is the first time he fucks me big time. And so I go into my second fight, and I'm fighting Wagner Rocha in Nebraska, another tough jiu-jitsu guy. And but I'm like full power, man. I'm full power. Like, I've been sober for maybe 2 months, a long time, man. I'm feeling like charged. And I knocked the guy out, you know, in like the first round. My first like knockout, you know, it was a nice knockout. And it was the only knockout of the night, the only one. No other guy actually knocked anybody out. And they're giving bonuses away for, this is when they start doing the fight of the night, and this is all fairly new. Everybody's coming to me and they're like, yeah, dude, you got the bonus. And I'm like, hell yeah, I need the bonus, because, you know, we don't have that much money. You can't live off of, you know, $20,000 for 6 months or whatever and pay all these people and all that. You got, you know, so you need that money to make it to the next fight. And especially me, like I said, I had these brothers. I had one brother, and they're both gone now. They were both struggling a lot, and they needed to live with me, and I needed to try to heal them and heal myself. I needed that money. And he looks at me after the fight, and we're in the press conference, and I'm there, and he gives the bonus to some guy who didn't even knock anybody out. He's like, he's like, you know, I know Jonathan got the knockout, but I'm going to give the bonus to this guy. And I was like, what the And he looks at me, he's like, and you know how Dana White, and he's like, you got a problem with that? He's like, say something. Like, literally in the press conference. And I'm sitting there, this little quiet, I'm like, nah, man. Like, I mean, like, that's cool with me, whatever. And I'm like, what does this dude got against me? The whole time, man, always treat me like that. Treat me like trash, like I was just and and so that was it. And so from then on, I never recovered. It's not his fault, but I needed that money to take care of my family and get to the next fight without crashing. And I couldn't. By the time I got to Charles Oliveira, I was behind on money, behind on rent, behind on everything. He beats me. Then I have even less money. By the time I get to Dustin Poirier, I'm sleeping on people's couches. I'm not even in, Florida anymore. I'm all the way back in Oregon where I grew up sleeping on friends' couches from high school. And I'm calling the UFC. I'm like, just give me another fight, man. Like, I don't care who it is. Like, whatever, man. Just give me a fight. And they're like, all right, we'll give you, so that was how that fight, me getting it with Dustin Poirier. So, when sometimes one dude called me out on it, he's like, you said, win or lose, you're going to go to India. Did you mean if you won, would you have stayed in the UFC? It was like, no, you're right. I knew I wasn't going to win. Realistically, I wasn't even, I thought maybe I could win. I wouldn't count myself out, but I also knew that I wasn't there anymore. Like, I needed to change directions for a bit. So that's how that whole fight and everything, came to be. But shout out to Dustin Poirier and his family. They were really cool, man. I remember after the fight, his mom and everybody came up to me and they're like, oh, he's I dress kind of preppy and also like a homeless preppy person. They're like, oh, he's a preppy dude. And I was like, yeah, that's me.
So wow, there's a lot in that for sure. As a part of your story, there seems to be, you've gone through a lot of trauma. It seems there was a lot going on, and probably in a classic, Western style way. One of the ways to try and deal with that trauma, to break the patterns that you've tried, is through consumerism. And, I got to get the blender, and I'll get the blender first and then I'll be healthy. That'll change. The blender will change my pattern, not my pattern will change so that I need the blender. And that seems like I've done the same thing. I got the Vitamix in the cupboard now. It seems like that's a typically Western consumerism style solution to spirituality, potentially.
Yeah.
But then you've gone, you've made this decision to go to India, maybe to seek that change more internally. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I have a very hippie spirit, the word hippie, counterculture type thing, and I think that's why the weed was so comforting for me, because it allowed me to kind of exit the wavelength that the masses seem to be on, and I could kind of get onto my own a bit more what it felt like, but it was always an illusion, and so that's one thing that I kind of know right now. Man, I'm sweating, it's hot in here. That's one thing that I've come to know now. I'm 34, and I'll still fall back into it sometimes, to where I'm just like, you know what, man, like, I don't really like the norm, I like this abstract world a bit more. And then before I know it, it's like I'm so detached that I, again, you stop knowing which way is up. So India was another one where it was like, there's something wrong with the way that I'm associating with my environment. That's what's making me feel like I can't be in it without some sort of substance. But I know that's not the truth. I like, Dave Chappelle said something really fascinating once. When he had his breakdown and then he went to Africa, and he's like, why is it that, every time all of us celebrities, he was like Martin Lawrence and he's like Mariah Carey, why is it when we have these breakdowns, you want to call us crazy? He's like, we couldn't get to where we were without being very strong people. He's like, you can't call somebody that strong crazy. He's like, maybe it's not them, maybe it's the environment. And that I took that to heart. I thought to myself, you know what, man, like I'm not messed up, like I'm a strong person. It might not be necessarily me. I just might be in the wrong environment. And sure enough, like when I would change environments, I would change my being, and in India so India was another one, 6 months, no substances, one of another first time where on the plane ride over there, I'm getting wasted and I'm drinking. And then as soon as I land, I had one more glass of wine, and I was like, you know what, man? Like, I don't really want to do this over here. Boom. For the next 6 months, nothing, man. So, those types of things were always but so now it's not about running away to a new environment it's really about knowing that it's always in here, and that environment needs the most cultivation. And so, and I'm building that now.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. The way I've always looked at it is, even Superman needed his cave of solitude, right?
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from, and those adventures that you've had in India. I mean, one thing I know is that you actually were, you've gone to India for this break, for this change. You're actually bitten by a snake over there.
Yeah.
Is that, you can get the imagery of that. How is that going down?
That was weird, man. That was so weird. I was floating in the ocean one day, just like floating, and because I was taking a yoga course, and we would have these like hour-long breaks where we could just kind of go to the ocean and then come back and practice yoga. And one day I was just like, you know what, man? Like as you go into the ocean, if you just lay in the ocean, you start to notice as you watch the shore that you're drifting, like down the shoreline. And I always liked that. I was like, all right, I'll just kind of, get in the ocean and just kind of lay on my back and then see how far I drift, and then I'll get out and I'll walk back. And I like doing that. And it was just kind of like my relaxation. And so I go into the ocean one day, and I'm like, all right, so I'm going to just float. I'm going to just float down the ocean. And when I feel ready to get out, I'll just wait for the feeling and I'll get out. And so I'm going, and normally I trust my instincts like this. And lately, sometimes I'm spot on. I'm like, all right, just go with the flow, feel it out. Okay, this spot looks good. It feels good. Boom, there you are. You don't always end up in the exact spot that you're sometimes, like I said, sometimes you get the medicine that you need, not what you want. And, I decided that now was the right time to get out of the ocean. And as soon as I made the choice to get out of the ocean, the first step that I took to put onto the ground or onto the sand, it was like something sharp had just went into my toe. I was like, shit. I was like, oh man, I think I just stepped on like some glass or something, or something, right? So I'm like kind of like walking out of the ocean like, dang, man, I stepped on something sharp. I just thought it was something sharp. And as I'm going to walk more out of the ocean, I'm like, dang, man, it must really hurt. And I look down at my foot, and it's only like 2 little drops of blood coming out. Like I'd got like something. I'm like, dang, what's this? Like, like what did I step on? Like 2 pricks of something? But it started to hurt a lot. I'm like, dang, for 2 pricks in my toe, that's really starting to hurt, man. And then sure enough, I can't walk. And I'm like kind of like crawling on the ground out of the ocean. And then people are watching me, they're watching me like kind of like stumble. And then somebody comes up and they're like, come help me. Cause you see a guy kind of crawling out of the ocean, and they look at my foot. They're like, I think you got bit by a snake. And I was like, no way. No, I didn't. They're like, nah, man. Yeah, man. They think you got bit by a snake. And I'm like, oh, it's hurting too. And then people come over, they rush, they tie up my leg. And now there's massive amounts of people. There's like massive amounts of people, around me. And everybody's real scared. They're trying to like calm me down, pat my forehead. And this is like all the Indians now. They're like scared for me. They're like, oh, this foreigner's gonna die. He just got bit by a snake. They're like some of them are like entertained, and some of them are really scared. And it actually was like kind of funny because there was one beggar lady. There's a lot of beggars, people that beg for things in India, and one lady in particular would always come to me and always like, sell me things. And I'm always like, some days I give her money. And I was like, finally got to the point, like the day before, I was like, I got nothing else for you. I'm so sorry, but I cannot buy anything else. I am so sorry. And it would turn into like a little bit of an argument. 'Cause she's like, what? You buy from me every day. I'm like, I know, but I can't. I'm really sorry. And she got kind of mad at me and all this. And I had to like put my foot down. She was the one that like gave me the most help she ended up coming out of nowhere. And when it came out, I was like, oh man, I'm going to buy from you for more often. But, it ended up taking like an hour for some sort of crazy Jeep to get down to the beach. I don't even know where a hospital was. They like drove me through the jungle, this and the other. And I get to a hospital. that looked like I probably had more of a chance of dying just from being in the hospital than from the snake bite. I'll take my chances with the snake bite than being in this hospital, man. Everybody in here looks like they're about to die, and it's like, it's just not what I expected at all. And so they wanted to keep me in there. They gave me some medicine, and then it subsided. It took about 6 hours. The pain went down. So I don't exactly know what or how or what I got bit. They said it was a snake. I say it's a snake. They, whatever. And so when I go back to the bungalow and stuff where I'm staying, I'm sitting at the restaurant the next day, and some guys are laughing. You hear about the foreigner who got bit by a snake. I'm like, that was me. They're like, you didn't get bit by a snake. I said, I swear to God I did. I got bit by a snake, man. They're like, no, you didn't. There's not even any snakes out right now. I said, I bet you, man, I got bit by a snake. Next thing I know, a giant-ass cobra falls from a tree right there, right next to us. Swear to God. I said, look, man. I said, there's snakes out, and I got bit by one. So it was just weird, man. I don't know what the universe had in store for me getting bit by a snake or the whole experience, but the fact that when I was telling them that I did, and then a snake dropped out of a tree, I thought that was pretty cool.
Wow, that is an amazing story, and it does seem, you could take it on the surface, but it does seem a little steeped in a bit of symbolism there.
Yeah.
On the whole thing, but who knows, right? So
yeah.
There's, two places I want to talk to you about in India that you went, or just if you can explain, how they went, and that's Rishikesh and Dharamsala. And I know you helped some people at school over there, and if you could just take us through those, what went on in those two places.
Rishikesh was phenomenal. I liked it there at the Beatles ashram, where the Beatles went to study transcendental meditation. It's really interesting how life goes, right? We tell these stories about symbolism and coincidence, and I like this little coincidence. So growing up, my best friends, my two best friends when I was a little kid, 5, 6 years old, they were obsessed with the Beatles. And I'm 6 years old. What kind of 6-year-old likes the Beatles? I didn't know nothing about the Beatles, man. And they loved them. They loved the Beatles. Their parents were hippies. So I always once I got older, I liked the Beatles a lot because it reminded me of my friends. And when I get to Rishikesh, they have this old ashram that you can't really find. If you go to Rishikesh, you don't automatically have access to the Beatles ashram. You got to ask somebody who knows where it's at. And it's a trek. You have to go through quite a bit of jungle and stuff because it's tucked away and it's kind of preserved. And it's now being, the jungle is kind of growing over it. But they have all these old meditation huts and all these things, and people will come and give their love and spray paint and all of that. And that to me was, I think, one of the more profound things about Rishikesh to me, believe it or not. It wasn't so much because it's the yoga capital of the world. Whatever that means, you can't really find that, whatever that allure or ancient, yoga systems. It's not the same now. It's it's modern and it's consumerism and it's you might as well go to anywhere, Thailand and whatever, right? But, getting access to this place where Westerners have gone and it's more of a representation of a Western mindset and its desire to learn this. And why I thought that was cool was I ended up becoming friends with Sean Lennon here in New York. Sean Lennon is John Lennon's son. And to have that connection with him and be like, yeah, man, I went to, where, your dad and all of them went, I was like, we should go one day, so that to me was a cool connection to actually meet Sean and tell him that I had been there and all that. So Rishikesh was cool that way. And, then, Dharamsala was, that was the real deal. That was the ticket. That's what you're looking for. If you're looking for the practical application of what is the end result of yoga and all of this, it's what you're going to get in Dharamsala in the Vipassana centers and the people that are trying to preserve what the Buddha was trying to express, which is the idea, or rather the technique of meditation. Because without meditation, nothing works, nothing at all.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. I think, I don't know that much about yoga, but my understanding, like, there was, say, 8 limbs of yoga or Raja yoga, which was, had a whole element of, controlling yourself that really gets taken out in, a lot of yoga places over here where it's really just, stretching in a nice environment that people don't, and maybe put on a nice CD, a bit of music. But again, that's not my area. Can you take us through your experience with the kids at school, over there?
Oh yeah, that's true. I did kind of gloss over that. The kids at school, that was actually the real thing that I got out, besides the Beatles ashram, I guess. I don't know why I told that story first. I think the kids is kind of bittersweet to me in a way. Sorry, I'm so stuffy. The kids is kind of bittersweet to me in a way because I never got to know for sure, like, how far they took it, or, and I always wanted to go back and visit them. But then again, it was street kids that were begging. They were begging me for money when I was over by the Ganga River. We call it the Ganges in the West. And I would always go to the Ganga every morning, and I would sit there on these rocks, and the Ganga, man, it's cool, man. It's like these like rivers and it's kind of cool. I'm by the Hudson now. The Hudson kind of reminds me of the Ganga, believe it or not. The strong energy of the water. But these kids would come and they'd beg me for money every day, and I'm like always telling them. And I'm a giver, man. You ask me for something, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna give it to you, and then I'm gonna be hurt about it later. So, if it's my last $10, I'm gonna give it to you. And these kids were sucking me dry, man. They were coming every day, and they would come. They see me, they come running. They were like, and I like tell them one day, I said, man, look. You guys can't keep coming to me while I'm here in the mornings and keep asking me for money every day. Like, why aren't you guys in school? Like, do something else. Like, why don't you have anything to do? And they're like, we can't go to school. We don't have any money. We can't afford it. And I was like, how much is school? Or I was like, no, where's your school? Like, where is it? And they're like, it's up over here. I asked them, I said, do you want to go to school? And they're like, yeah. They were all excited. They're like, heck yeah, we want to go to school. And I was like, all right, well, take me over there and let me see what I can do. Because it'd be better than you guys asking me for money every morning. So these 3 kids, and it was this young one. So there was like 2 older ones who were like mad, they were like mad dirty. Like they always had dirt on their face and their clothes were all dirty and stuff like that. So I hate to be like that, but if it was just those 2 older, like 13 teenagers and they and they were dirty, I probably would have just like not thought too much of it, or I kept giving them money and tried to shoo them away, whatever. But they had this little like 6-year-old with them who was just so cute, man. It was just like this kid could have been a model or something, And every time I would try to shoo him away, the little one, 6-year-old, would always make some sort of joke, and she'd try to make it funny and this, that, the other. And I was just like, all right, man, I can't fully just push you guys away. Like, this little one's too cute. I got to do something with you guys. So take me to your school. Let me see what I can do. So the 3 of them, they walked me to their school. And sure enough, there was a school, and there's a ton of kids playing, and they all had uniforms on, and it was like, and I was like, whoa, okay. So I walk in, and I was like, who's the headmaster or whatever? Who do I talk to? I want to get these 3 kids hanging out with these other kids. And they were like, what? And so they brought me into the principal or whatever, the person of the school. And so all 4 of us, 3 kids and me, are walking into this office. And they immediately like start to scold the kids. They say like, hey, like slapping the kids and pushing them out and da-da-da. And they bring me in. They're like, what are you doing with these kids? These are bad kids. I'm like, why are these kids bad? They're not bad. Why are you saying they're bad? They're like, because they're bad. They begging you for money and they're trying to take advantage of you. I'm like, no, they're not taking advantage of me. I'm here because I want to help them out. I want to see what does it take to get them in school. They're like, oh, you want to pay for them to be in school? I'm like, yeah. How much does it cost to get these kids in school? They're like $20 a year. I'm like, $20 a year or something like that. I'm like, okay, like, sign them up. They're like, well, that's not the big issue. The big issue is now you got to buy their uniforms, you got to buy their books, and you got to buy their school supplies. Can you do all that? And I was like, do they know where to get all of this stuff? They're like, and the kids were like, yeah, we know. And I was like, all right. I was like, I signed them up and I'll buy all of their stuff. And, they're like, okay, okay. So they're in. So then the next morning, we meet up, or the kids, I said the next morning to the kids, I said, come meet me by the bridge. They have these big bridges by the Ganges River. We're going to take a rickshaw and we're going to go into this other part of town or whatever. We're going to buy all your supplies. And they're so excited. They show up the next morning with like 3 more kids. I'm like, what, man? I was like, they're like, yeah, these kids, they're like, them too. I'm like, no, like, it was you 3 for the past week or whatever. Now you got 3 other kids now. I'm sorry, man. But then I couldn't just be like, whatever. So we end up taking a trip with like 6 kids. We go into this new part of town. All the food they want to eat, backpacks and school supplies and da-da-da-da. It's probably one of the best days of my life, man, to be able to do that for these kids, to like watch them eat. But that's why I say it was like bittersweet though, man, because you don't know what happens, man. Like I wish I could have done that for them for the rest of my life, man. And so sometimes it doesn't seem like enough. And I get why people don't give to people, why they're like, you can give a man a fish and he eats for a day, but you teach a man to fish, and it's kind of like that. And I always wish that I could have gone back and seen him again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful story, and a great thing that you've done, no doubt. But of course, yeah, I get what you say, how it could be bittersweet, but you just got to appreciate the things that you could do while you were there. I suppose, and at least you did that, and that's it's putting some good out there, and it's a good action for sure. Moving on, just one question about Dharamsala. Was that a silent meditation, a silent retreat you went to there, or?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that process?
Yeah. So Vipassana is the technique of meditation that the Buddha used. That was what he called the technique that he was using to meditate, which meant insight. It meant to know. To kind of know the truth, see the truth as it is. And it's only taught in these specific places, these specific retreat centers. They're called Vipassana centers, and they're all over the world. You can go to them. In India. I've done one in America, in Georgia. I've done another one in Canada. And the only rule is, like, for anybody who listens or would like to try, and actually, you're in Australia, right? It was actually an Australian who put me onto it. And I met an Australian in India. There's a lot of Australians traveling around India and Thailand and stuff. A very adventurous group, you Australians, man. I dig it. So, this Australian, he says, he's going to go do a Vipassana. I didn't know what it was. I was like, you're crazy, man. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go sit in silence for 10 days. I'm like, why would you come to India and do that? You know what I'm saying? There's so much to do. Like, there's so many places, and you're going to go sit in silence for 10 days? You're crazy. But because he was so cool, and he's a rugby player and all this, and I'm like, he's a badass. If he feels like this is good, then I should probably try it out myself. And it was the hardest thing that I had ever done. The hardest thing, for sure. 6 weeks in the Ultimate Fighter house was nothing compared to 10 days in silence. Because it's not just silence. It's silence, and it's also sitting in the same space, same spot the whole entire day. So you're just sitting there the whole day for 10 days. It's so freaking hard, man. But it's worth it. I love it. I wanted to do one every year for the rest of my life. And since I did my first one, I managed to keep it up for like the next 5 years or so. I did one every year, and I've done 6 in total. But these past couple years, I haven't found the time to escape and go do one. But you want to talk about experiencing a part of yourself, rewiring the habits, and being like, whoa, man, like, I didn't know that I could look at a flower and have such an experience with this flower. You know how they always tell you, like, stop and smell the roses, and you're like, I smell it, I'm moving on. But you really want to stop and smell the roses, sit in silence for 10 days, and then see what that rose smells like on the 10th day. It's going to be freaking amazing.
Yeah, wow. Maybe I check that out with the Australian connection, but yeah, sitting silent for 10 days, that sounds very challenging. Not something I'd just I'd jump into straight off the bat.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you got some good insight from it, no doubt. Speaking of going silent, we're closing into an hour. Are you able to stick around for a couple more questions? Because I had a few more on Gurdjieff. I wanted to ask.
Gurdjieff. If you're asking about Gurdjieff, I gotta stick around.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd say that. So let's say you go back into the fighting side of things, but we'll leave that for another day, because I'm sure there's probably another couple of hours about GSP and Firas Zahabi, no doubt.
Yeah, let's do that another time. Guaranteed.
Yeah. But what I'd really like to get into is, I know that now, like, your podcast is called The Work, and that maybe you've taken some of those lessons that you've learned in India and you've gotten into the work of the mystic George Gurdjieff.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could just take us through that and a little bit about that.
Yeah, Gurdjieff, man. It's so funny, man. Like, I'm probably the weirdest dude in the world, man, because, like, once I found Gurdjieff, I'm like, that's it, man. That's my guy, man. And mostly it's because I can't understand his work, you know? Like, so a lot of it I can't understand, and it'll take me the rest of my life to understand. But it was what he called the fourth way. And once I kind of saw that, so I was searching, and I was always really into yoga and these types of things, sometimes indirectly, because what happened was, in my early fight career, before I was on The Ultimate Fighter, before I had any money, me and my girlfriend, we couldn't afford anything. We couldn't afford to go to movies. We couldn't afford any entertainment. The only thing we could afford was the public library. Because it's free. So you could get like 15 books or whatever, and sometimes they had movies and stuff. And ironically, that was like some of the best times of my life. Just like, we would walk like miles to the public library and pick up all these books and movies and walk back in like miles for our entertainment. And just being in the public library at that time was like, then again, this is pre-Ultimate Fighter, pre-any money. And all the books that I would gravitate towards were always like the spiritual section, and I loved that stuff. So that was cool that as a young kid, like, that we had no entertainment, and it allowed us to go into a place, and it was like, find what you like, what you're interested in, and you would go through these sections and just kind of feel it out organically. And my girlfriend at the time, she ended up always gravitating towards cookbooks. She always just got cookbooks. And I'm like, this is so weird and lame. Now she's like mad Instagram famous. Go check out. She's got like 200K followers. She's like massively successful doing cooking shit. And I'm like, wow, man, that's pretty cool. And me, I was into like spiritual stuff. And that's kind of what led me to India. And I would study all these things. I would study every line of work that I could think of, and I've taken it all in. I studied whether it was Vedic literature or ancient Egypt or this or that. How have humans been trying to solve the riddle? And when I stumbled upon Gurdjieff's work, and he was like, "This is the fourth way." He's like, these other ways that you're trying to go, like almost like he's speaking to me. He's like, humans used to be able to be monks, and they used to be able to be yogis, and they used to be able to be fakirs, which is like a Islamic way of spirituality, maybe like Rumi and Sufis and all that stuff. He said, you used to be able to do these things, but you can't now in modern society. This is the fourth way. This is the way for the modern dude to reach that level. I'm like, oh shoot, like that's what I'm looking for. Like I'm going and I'm barking up the wrong tree. I'm going through all these like ancient modalities, and here's somebody who's explaining it in the modern context. So I go into his work a little bit, and then he has a little movie out. If anybody ever wants to find it online, it's called Meetings with Remarkable Men. And it is kind of a biopic about his life and how he went exploring to try to find this truth that he's trying to now give to, humanity. And I just resonated with it. I was like, man, I know what that's like, man. I know what that's like to travel the world and to be just like really obsessed with this, like this bubbling inside of you that feels this connection. Like you see it, like you see everything connecting and you're living it and you can't explain it, but you know that it's there and you just need a little bit more of a map. And he was giving me that map, and he was explaining the human body. He was explaining the interaction of energy. He was saying that like your human body is essentially just a chemical food factory, and it only has 3 types of food. It has the air that you breathe, it has the food that you actually eat, and it has the impressions that you take in, which is everything that your senses take in. And he says, well, it's easy to see how air is a type of food or breath, because if you take the breath away, your body's going to die within a couple of minutes. He said food as well. It's easy to see that your machine runs on food. And he also calls it a machine a lot. He's saying that this is a machine. And that to me is something that I always kind of like could kind of feel and understand. I'm like, this is not necessarily like, it's mostly automatic, man. I didn't ask my skin to do this. There's things going to my fingertips and it's just all happening automatically. Who am I to say that I'm this? This thing is mostly itself. I'm just like, whatever. And yeah, I mean, and I can't speak Chinese, I want to, but I can't, right? So it's like, I don't have access to infinitely. I'm stuck like but there's something in me that knows that I'm more than that. But why am I limited to just whatever this form is, right? But he says it's the impressions that a lot of people can't comprehend as a form of food. And he says, think about that. He says, if you stop the flow of impressions to your experience, snap your fingers, and now your senses are gone, sight, whatever, then where are you? He says that's a type of food for the body, and maybe one of the most important. And then that clicked for me, because I was like, oh, Buddha said the same thing. He said that's because that was all of what the Vipassana technique is to observe the sensations of the body, sit there in silence, and become aware of the sensations. Because Buddha says, everything that I think, that I'm thinking, it first has its root in a sensation of the body. If I didn't sense anything, if I had never had a sensation, if I never saw anything, smelled anything, this and the other, I would have never had a thought in the world. He's like, so for me to know exactly who I am, all I have to do is observe the actual sensations. They're creating my reality. And once I could see that Gurdjieff and Gautama Buddha were very aligned, but Gurdjieff was taking it a step further and actually making a step to explain it in a very modern and scientific context, I was hooked. I'm like, this is my guy, man.
Wow. So it sounds like you've gone, you've fallen in love with his work. I probably don't think so. Exaggeration.
Yeah. No, yeah, I have.
Now, I know Gurdjieff had, self-observation was big, as you mentioned, paying attention to your senses. And that's, the idea that you are what your senses are, influencing your nervous system is a lot to take in.
Yeah.
What is, what is some of the self-observation exercises that he recommends or that you do, or how do you get into that side of things?
So Gurdjieff has what's called self-remembering. That's what he calls it, self-remembering. But it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing as Vipassana. It is Vipassana. So that's why I was like, when I was in a Vipassana center, I was like, you have to mix the two. Theory and practice must go hand in hand. So if you study Gurdjieff's work, but you don't have a strong Vipassana practice, it'll never go anywhere. It's like you watching a lot of jiu-jitsu videos and studying John Danaher's literature, but you'll never be Gary Tonin because he sits there in the den all the time and practices it. But then again, if Gary didn't know John Danaher and didn't know the theory and this, that, and the other, then he really wouldn't become Gary Tonin, as naturally talented and gifted as he is. Like, theory and practice must go hand in hand. So that's kind of like where Gurdjieff and the practice of Vipassana, to me, it's like they have to go hand in hand. You can't just like study his work and be like, well, I'm gonna try. That'd be like, again, studying a little bit of John Danaher's technique and then thinking that you're gonna go do some Imanari roll or this, that, and the other because you've watched the video a ton of times, and so now you want to go to the street and you just want to pull it off. I'm just gonna go pull it off. You have to practice it a lot, and that's where like going to like a silent meditation center is gonna help you cultivate this sense of awareness, because honestly, that's the only thing, is to be aware, to know. That's it, just awareness, and I mean awareness of the body. And that's why I'm always referencing martial artists as being far more spiritual than they give themselves credit for. I just feel like that's, again, it's another, these are paths that are directly intertwined, because you have to go so deep inside. It's one thing to get nerves for like a basketball game, or you're running track in front of, like a big crowd, or you're nervous, this and the other. There's just no other sport where there's so much on the line. You get what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna get knocked the fudge out. You're gonna get I try to explain to people, man, you can get traumatized pretty badly in a fight. You lose a 100-meter sprint, or you lose a football game. Maybe you get, knocked out pretty bad in a football game, this and the other, but I just say, like, fighting's the one that puts the most on the line, and that's gonna cause a huge inner conflict, which is like, that's the seed that you need for growth.
Yeah, that's huge that you look at it as that is actually required for that growth, because I know that Gurdjieff, one of his ideas is that of intentional suffering.
Yeah.
So would you say that, the process of fighting is sometimes maybe intentional suffering to spur growth?
Yeah, well, especially the act of cutting weight. that for sure. I mean, like, you got to look at it like cutting weight is like a spiritual practice through and through. I mean, what do you think Jesus was doing when he was 40 days fasting in the desert? You think he wasn't cutting weight? You think he wasn't losing some weight? And that goes hand in hand, that type of discipline. And so I'm trying to tell the fighters, I'm trying to get this podcast out, and I'm like, man, guys, I got something to say that you guys might find valuable, because realistically, you're deep individuals and you got value, and you're not just barbarians, you're freaking leaders of humanity in a lot of ways, because of that spiritual practice that you are indirectly and sometimes unintentionally putting yourself into. Like, nobody else is doing that. You're literally sitting in a sweat lodge and facing yourself. And if you knew what you were facing, and if you knew how to cultivate that and turn that into something, and I guess I'm speaking to myself as well, like, you're going to win. You're going to win in life. And that's what I keep telling myself. Like, oftentimes, I look at it and I'm like, you won this show that called you the Ultimate Fighter, and you sucked at fighting. You didn't even do that good at fighting. So why the hell do you think the universe gave you the title for you to know that you are the ultimate fighter? Is because I ain't going to give up at life. And I'm going to use those lessons. Like, God bless my sister, my little brother, my older brother, who didn't make it. And I got to fight that same battle every single day. Now I know for the rest of my life, that I have to fight a battle to stay sober and to, it's a fight. It's a fight for the rest of my life, for however much longer I got. And that's what's going to make me the ultimate fighter, is there's going to be some point where I stand proud and I say, like, I love who I am, and I didn't give up on myself, and I'm going to help somebody. And it ain't going to be how many more people I knock out in my life that's going to make me the ultimate fighter. It's going to be how I live life that's going to make me the ultimate fighter.
That is a beautiful way of looking at it. I'll tell you that everyone's got struggles they're going through for sure, and that life is a fight for everyone.
Yeah,
it's a great perspective to take on things. I want to focus in on one thing that you just said with the let's take John Danaher's example that you were using, where you can know the techniques, learn them from a DVD, but unless you're in there doing the work, it's not enough. You got to go a bit deeper. And then you kind of mentioned that the process of cutting weight, is that kind of the same thing for a lot of fighters, where even though they're doing the process of the weight cut, maybe they don't know the other side of things, of how that could be a practice?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not condoning it. I'm saying, well, yeah, like, get into fighting so that you can cut weight and be more spiritual. No, like, actually, cutting weight is not a good thing for the most part. And you shouldn't cut too much. Even just a matter of just cutting just 10 pounds. 10 pounds alone. Just 10. Like, 10 is safe. You can cut 10 pounds of water, and you can do that in a day and bring it back. And if done correctly, is actually like fairly therapeutic and can probably like kind of recalibrate, get some things out of the body, put some good things in and stuff like that. And so do I think that fighters kind of dial in, what that process of I always looked at it like a therapy. I'm 34 years old now, and I'm still fairly healthy. If I could probably still, do okay in some fights. Some weight cuts damaged me long term, but some weight cuts I think played a big role in my longevity if done right. So like you look at like Joe Rogan and his last podcast with like Rhonda Patrick, and they're talking about like the sauna and all of these benefits and this and the other. So I look at the fighter's lifestyle as martial arts at its core, again, theory and practice, was martial arts at its beginning came from what we know as like Shaolin, right? Shaolin monks in Kung Fu. We're hard pressed to find an older version of martial arts, even though we know that in India there was martial arts in combat forms. But as far as like a lot of us are have been, taught in the West and has been shown, we like Kung Fu and what we grew up watching, it's like Shaolin. So how did that start? And you look at it and it's like, it wasn't so that these guys could get into cages and fight each other and this and the other. Martial arts at its root was the cultivation of energy in the body so that these monks could meditate longer and defend themselves at the same time, but so that they could strengthen their body and be healthy, strong individuals. So I look at martial artists today and I would wish that we were still the leaders of cultivating true chi and true energy and being leaders and examples of that. So I think we sometimes miss the mark. I think jiu-jitsu has become more of a culture that promotes a longevity aspect to it. Like, we're doing this for camaraderie. We move and we use the body well, and at the end of it, we're healthier for it. As MMA, if you get into like MMA and you're like, I want to be an MMA fighter, there's not so much of that culture where like you're just doing it for fun and you're just doing it because it makes you feel good. You're going to try to fight somebody. I think that's where you kind of miss the mark. So I think like the preservation of martial arts, the cultivation of good energy, spirituality and all that, I think it's still very much linked inside of jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu is something that I would like to find myself back, involved in due time.
Okay, so I like the way you've looked at taking that practice and, as a transformative side of yourself. And I think that one of the tenets of Gurdjieff's work was that you want to be able to change your being. That should be the primary focus. And then through that, you could possibly change the world or, be an example for the world. So it's, focused on changing yourself first and then, letting any positive benefits flow out from that. Is that something that you believe?
Changing yourself first. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the ultimate law right now. Not just for myself, but for everybody. We are now in a position, many of us, where we have the time, we have the space to kind of reassess and take a look at some of our habits and see, can we redirect this machine? And that's why I felt like the work, the podcast would be beneficial, because it would be maybe to build a tribe and a community that's like, okay, like I'm not perfect, and wait a second, like I don't have all of the control that I think that I do. How can I make that observation and gather the tools to reassess and recorrect and all of that? That's it, man. That's the work. It's a matter of just like taking accountability. I think somebody's on my last podcast said that it's like taking accountability, like being like aware of the shortcomings, and everybody's got them. They could be little and they're different and they're that and this and the other. But I mean, if you're not going to take accountability for it, if you're going to be the type of person who's like, well, my life is perfect. Look, I got my family, I got my house, I got my kids, I got this, I'm straight. But you're not. You're probably still a jackass, like in some ways. And what I mean by that is, like, nobody's perfect. And if you can't take the time to really put that oxygen mask on yourself, you're going to miss the ability to be able to extend that to somebody else. You're going to miss that empathy and the compassion that it truly takes to understand somebody who's hurting. You won't be able to see it. And you need to be able to put that oxygen mask on other people. People need to breathe too. And if you can't put it on yourself really fully, you're never going to really be able to supply anybody. And at best case, I mean, at worst case, you're going to just like maybe have a supply for yourself. And that's how we got into the situation in the first place.
I think that is a great way of looking at things, and probably a good spot to wrap it up on. You mentioned your podcast, The Work, and I think that's a good one for everyone to go check out. If people want to get in touch with you, I mean, what's their best way to go about things, Jonathan?
Yeah, just hit up my Instagram. I think that's where I'm the most active right now. I'm doing the stories, trying to document life as it comes and all that. Excellent.
So the Instagram, I'll put that in show notes, and I've really enjoyed this. I think that's been a fantastic story with a lot of lessons to take away from there. And we didn't even get into GSP and Vipassana Hobby, which is something that maybe you can come back on in the future, as long as you've enjoyed this one, and we can discuss it another time.
Yeah, I would love that, man. You're smart, you're awesome, and that was really pleasant for me. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that too. And I'm like, now I just got to keep my ego in check with that compliment, you know? I'm like, oh,
my man. Thank you, Sonny Brown. It was very cool.
Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.